Yes, so this is the very famous tool for the reconnaissance, that the process which happens in the information security, especially bug bounty hunters, takes care of it. And apart from it, Yogesh basically belongs to Nepal and currently working in TRG R&D company as in research associate and development. And Yogesh have represented himself with his creation and his talks in the famous conferences like Black Hat USA and TEDx Bangalore, Hack in the Box Abu Dhabi, and a lot more. So yes, I hope Yogesh, that was all from my side from an introduction part.
Thank you very much, Aman. It was a good introduction. Thank you. I feel very overwhelmed.
Great, thank you. Okay, so just to start with our session, so basically the very first question is, the basics comes first, like just to talk on the reNgine journey. Okay, so how did you started reNgine, how this whole idea of creating a tool reNgine came into your mind? And especially if I'm talking in terms of open source tool, you might have made this a commercial tool, get into it in a whole startup cybersecurity based startup company and made this commercial tool. But why exactly open source?
Thank you, Aman, for the question. Actually, I think reNgine started out of frustration. So 2-3 years ago, I used to work as a penetration tester, and my day job was, doing a lot of reconnaissance and then gathering the data, doing the pen testing. And at some point in time, as a good developer, I was frustrated by what is happening there, because a lot of things that we do in reconnaissance are, it's a lot of repetitive tasks, right? Even if you say, let's say, if you want to do directory file fuzzing, at a lot of time you might use FF, and the commands that you use might be always same. Either if you're using GSH history, if you're using it as a bash history, that's good for you. But if you're not, you probably might want to remember all the syntax, probably might want to remember all the command line arguments. So it's a hassle, and with a lot of tools that becomes even more hassle. And so what happened was, and I was also doing bug bounty. So I think that's when I used a lot of other reconnaissance tools, and I found a major gap in the traditional recon workflow. The traditional recon workflow only had, let's say, a lot of reconnaissance tools that you have used in the past. They only had one kind of scan that you could do. Okay, stick to what I say, stick to my reconnaissance methods, and then that's how you get the results. When you do that, you do not stand out from the crowd because the configuration is very minimal, right? So I started thinking about how I could make it look like a commercial tool with things like Acunetics. If you have used Acunetics and Invincity, some of these tools, they're really good, right? But and we also have a lot of these open source tools that could be brought together. A lot of from project discovery guys, they do an amazing job at creating a lot of these tools, right? And I sat down and I started brainstorming. And then I came up with an idea. The core of reNgine was the name itself, reNgine. I don't know if you know the full form of reNgine. It actually is reconnaissance engine. So the core at the heart of
Yogesh, we lost you.
I'm so sorry. I think my video is also. Wait a second. Yep. Is it clear now?
Yeah, that's perfect.
I'm sorry.
Yes, definitely.
Okay. Yeah. So I don't know if you know the full form of reNgine. The name reNgine came from reconnaissance engine, actually.
Okay.
So the engines that we have in reNgine is what made reNgine, is what separated us from everything else. So we started with things like full scan, subdomain only scan, or probably if you want to just gather, screenshots. So all of these recon workflows could be could be run using a very simple YAML configuration. And that YAML configuration was easy to modify. We had a documentation on how you modify them, a lot of these things. So initially, the idea was not to open source. It was something that I created for myself while working in a company, so that I could use it internally, or probably just to help with my bug bounty recon workflow. And that I was having a full-time job. So I wanted something that I could run while I was at office, and that could run over the night, or probably, let's say, during the days of when I was in the office, run the reconnaissance. And by the time I go back home, it just pops me up saying that, okay, these are the things that I found, right? So that was the idea. So I started creating, I think reNgine just crossed 2 years in May 3rd. That's when I wrote the first commit and reNgine. And I think May, June, July, 3 months, I think I worked and reNgine, and I showed it to a couple of hackers, a couple of people that I know in the industry, and then they said this is gonna be awesome, because there was nothing like reNgine. And then I open sourced it. I think it was in July when I think Jason Haddox is the one who first announced reNgine, and a couple of guys followed, and then it became a sensation, and reNgine was in the global trending for a couple of weeks. And then I think within the first few months, we had already crossed 1,000 stars on GitHub. And now we are at 4,000 stars on GitHub with I think a couple of major releases. So the idea was just that you could configure these scan engines with the YAML based, so that let's say you are working in a company right now, not a lot of customers want you to do active scan, so you might not want to do directory scan, right? And you might not want to do let's say a very penetrative task like your let's say brute forcing. They don't want you to do that, so you should have an option to disable them through a very easy to use YAML config, or it could be anything, so that you could just turn off and say that, okay, hey, this is the engine that I have defined for one of my customers, and do not do brute force, and do not do port scan, and do not do anything else that is active. I just gather my subdomains. So that was the idea on how reNgine started.
Okay. Means it's a really sensation that you talked about. So it's been almost 1.5 years that we are also using reNgine in our organization.
Right.
So like the very first, the release that you just got out. So we had our hands tested on the overall product that you have created, and especially when we talk about the reconnaissance part, and that too when we focus on like bug bounties and the personal security stuff that you are doing. Okay, so there is a very generic reconnaissance image of doing that in the CLI based things. Okay,
yep.
But this GUI is something which means really very crucial for people. Okay, and the thing is that you can configure it at any time based upon your requirements, and not sitting idle in front of your system and waiting for the results. So yes, that one thing is I really liked about it. And personally, that you talked about the project discovery thing. So the nuclear is one thing which is really fantastic, and the overall result seems to be pretty good, means no doubts. And yes, we are currently using the latest version of the engine as well, so means kudos to you for doing it in so great way. Okay, so yeah, that was a great indeed journey of reNgine what we have listened. So basically coming on to the next that is our basically core topic for today, the banking and fintech. So Signzy is basically an organization that basically we provides our customer onboarding solutions in terms of KYC, using to check the customer data with a real-time government database, say Aadhaar, PAN, the liveliness of the person who is doing the KYC. So banks are something which are really crucial to us because they are the largest customer base for us. So when we talk about the banks, okay, so currently what we have noticed is something like banks itself are developing technology at a very slow pace. Okay, because this is generally because of the kind of security checks, the kind of the regulations of the Indian government, say RBI or SEBI and something like that. Okay, so there are very rigid, strict policies when they used to develop in-house things. Okay, so they are onboarding the SaaS-based vendors to create a very fast workflow in their process and to go live as soon as possible.
Right.
So what do you think that onboarding the third-party vendors in terms to just speed up the process, although they used to do the security testing of the vendors, the compliance they used to do, the various audits they used to do. Okay, but do you really think that this might create an opportunity for attackers to really step into the core systems of the banks?
Yeah, I think supply chain, as you mentioned, supply chain is one of the biggest problems in fintech and banking, right? So now you have a lot of these supply chain that helps you share the data, storage of data. So there might be one vendor that handles your storage of data, another vendor that provides your payment service, or probably another vendor with SaaS solutions, right? So now the biggest problem, the biggest issue with the supply chain attack is that it is difficult for companies, let's say banks, to prevent, because the complexity arises when you have the number of supply chain vendors. As it increases the number of supply chain vendors, the attack surface just increases, right? And with the stuff like I just mentioned, compliance stuff, there are a lot of these compliance like ISO 9001 compatibility maturity models, and a lot of these models that come up. And I think that's one of the most rigorous way, or probably a rigorous standard that is set by the governments and organizations to limit the exposure. But at the same time, what really happens is that you do not have control over what has happened in the backend, what has happened with the third party vendor, right? So I don't remember exactly the company, but I think it was some of the Chinese company. They had planted a small chip inside one of those servers that they exported to Google's and Microsoft, I think back in 2014-15, when this supply chain, the largest supply chain vendor attack happened. The Chinese, malicious threat actors had just, I think it was a small chip that was implanted on one of these servers, and Google, Microsoft did not know about this for many years, right? So that is the problem with the supply chain, companies, that when they export the softwares to banks and fintechs, the major issues is that the data, where the data is being stored and how the data is being stored, though that a lot of these things can be covered with things like PCI and DSS, and even ISO 9001 compatibility maturity model. A lot of threat vectors comes from this supply chain.
Okay, so yeah, totally agree to your part. Like, yes, there would be some more rigorous, technical measures being involved in these supply chains, so to reduce the impact of the attacks on these crucial systems. Okay, so yeah, very good. So moving ahead on our second questions, like recently we have seen like in the, bots are something which are doing a lot of automation kind of attacks on the infrastructure. If you recently have saw the news for the, the ICS and SCADA based electrical system, so
Yep.
they are being very crucial to our country, and they are being attacked by a bot based attack. So how do you think that the bot within the time have been increasingly being smart?
I think I lost you, Aman. Can you hear me still?
Okay, okay, yeah, I can hear you. Okay, so my question was basically, the bots today are being
Yep.
really smart. Okay,
Yep.
so the people are creating them in such a way to majorly perform a disruption in the technology that currently the country is running on. So a
Yep.
very recent example we have is of the electrical grids that basically got compromised due to this bot attack.
Yep.
So how do you think that currently what exactly is the scenario, and how basically we can fight against those particular bots, or what anti measures our infrastructure we can develop to basically eliminate these kind of bot attacks?
Yeah, I think I got it sometimes back. I heard that in the news about the attack that you mentioned, the electric grids. I think the major problem that I see with these ICS and SCADA systems is that they work on really old software systems, and that they are mission critical systems. It's very difficult to update them as well. So that's where the problem arises. The problem is not in the application. The problem is not elsewhere. The problem arises right from the bottom, where the applications or the systems that are running in these mission critical systems, it's very difficult to update, right? And the protocols that they're using and the standards they're using, yeah, if you talk about the encryptions, those are way back dated in late 1990s. So I think the first problem, I think fixing this starts with fixing your infrastructures, updating your software systems that are being used in this mission critical system, right? And then after that, I think there is one more. I forgot the standard that is set out by ICS community. I think it's for pen testing your ICS and SCADA system. I don't exactly remember the number, but that also is a very good standard to follow up on how to secure your mission critical systems. And also a lot of this, in the past I have done pen testing on these ICS and SCADA systems. A lot of these they have absolute zero highs in terms of security. If we talk about the passwords, a lot of these they use vendor supply default username and password. That's where the problem begins. A lot of these do not even have let's say monitoring the failed login attempts, are probably having multiple failed attempts, even protecting the brute force. They do not have mechanism for that. So I think it begins with a very simple step. with the mission critical systems, as you know, that it's very difficult for somebody to just go and say, hey, update this whole system, update this whole computer. It's difficult to do that, right? And I think it begins with people and developers building the basic security hygiene for these mission critical application, where you say, hey, let's not use default username and password, let's not use old outdated software systems, old outdated components, right? Or any old outdated libraries. Or probably, let's say, let's have a protection mechanism just for the login brute force. So I think it begins with those very simple steps. And of course, on top of that, with your application layers, specific to your application, specific to your operating system, those are the different standards.
Very, very well said, because I exactly remember when I was a fresher and I was working in one of the IITs like IIT Kanpur. I have worked there as an intern. So basically, they majorly take care of these critical ICS and SCADA security part for the Indian government. So it was a totally when I got there and I got to see what kind of technologies they are working upon, and how the security researchers over there are exploiting the kind of vulnerability that you just mentioned of the old school kind of technology. So
Right.
that was something really very surprising, and I totally agree with you, like the developers and the security guys need to work collaboratively to enhance these kind of critical infrastructures.
And I think also the problem comes from from the development side. If you see, because of this mission, the way the mission critical applications are developed, now we have something called DevSecops, or what we call shift left. A lot of these emerging buzzwords are there, at least to prevent this kind of security loopholes right from the development phase, right? So these softwares that are being used right now are developed probably, let's say, 10, 12, 15 years ago, and where we didn't have something called DevSecops, or probably there was a very few people talking about AppSec, right? So I think a lot of developers probably, let's say, if you are to develop right now, probably you should focus on shifting to left. That's moving all of your security sprints, everything to right where you start developing your applications. It also is dependent on your, not dependent. It's also, let's say, analyzing your requirements, gathering requirements, all those things. When you start gathering the requirements, probably you should also start thinking about the security requirements. So when you say, we have a ICS, a SCADA system here, and we want to develop an application, or probably any protocol for it, maybe let's not have this, and let's have this, because having this causes this security issue, right? So I think a lot of developers should probably, right now, if you were to develop, maybe shift left and then have integrate security in a DevOps cycle, because a lot of these, I've seen people working in the mission critical system, they lack what we call DevOps. They don't have a DevOps culture. It's just that develop an application, use it against any of these mission critical system. If it works, it works. If it doesn't work, then just move ahead, right? So I think it's better people start focusing on DevSecops and shifting left, and probably that's when we start to find out more security, attack vectors. Probably even designing a threat model can also help these companies figure out what could go wrong, right? So exposing a lot of ports can expose a lot of attack vectors. It's a huge attack surface. So probably figuring out those things right when you do the development, right when you do the requirement gathering, and probably having a threat model saying that, hey, we are opening a port number 22 and we are opening a port number 21, and it also opens a space for, it also opens attack surface for attackers to go and attack into FTPs and SSS, right? So I think that's very important that we focus on, as I said, shift left, DevSecops, and probably threat modeling.
Correct. Totally agree to your point. Great. Okay, so Yogesh, my basically next question is something over the infrastructure security. Okay, so now as we can see that there are everything has been shifted to an online medium. If we specifically talk in terms of banking and payment industry, and the same fintech kind of industry, say buy now pay later companies, credit line companies, and all those kind of stuff. So when we used to visit the website, so basically overall information in terms of security that we are submitting, be it Aadhaar card data, be it our PAN data, be it debit credit card or UPI information, everything is basically passing through the infrastructure, everything is passing through the cloud. Okay, now we basically rely upon whatever the basic technologies the banks are asking us, or the banks is showing us, say like we are using TLS 1.2 or 1.3 encryption, the data is being encrypted, the data is very safe. Okay, but what exactly you and me think in terms of core security is the cloud infrastructure. Okay, so recently we have seen a very big rise in the terms of security misconfigurations for the cloud environments. Okay, so what do you think that exactly, just say an XYZ company, okay, so recently MobiQuick got breached. Okay, so similar, just so that was a kind of wallet based organization. So just in case we have some banks over there, or we have some credit line based card company over there, so just assume that if it got breached with the help of the misconfiguration, then what exactly should other organizations should learn from them?
I think the lessons that a lot of these companies can learn from these breaches is that, first of all, it's to identify how the breach occurred, right? So as you
Hmm.
said, the cloud misconfiguration, from where this cloud misconfiguration happens, is it that your third party or any third party vendor that's handling your cloud misconfiguration, or is it the developer that is doing that? And a lot of places, as you know, a lot of these developers, from where this attack surface arises is that, let's say you are testing, a lot of your developers are testing some new cloud environment, or probably some new application, new version of application. We move them to staging, we move them to let's say when you move it to staging or any other release cycle, what happens is that, let's say if you have probably weak security configuration, because developers, when they tend to test, that's when they leave it open, probably, let's say that doesn't has any authentication keys, that doesn't has any even the basic authentications. So what happens is that, probably figuring out your attack surface, figuring out your how big is your attack surface, from where and developing a threat model can help you figure out your attack surface. And these organizations, when the breach happens, figure out what went wrong with that company. Was it the third party provider, or was it the developer that had exposed the keys, right? And now you see a lot of this misconfigured AWS, misconfigured this cloud service provider. So is it that happening from your developer, or is it that those by default they are inherently insecure? Probably figuring out how you are handling those security configurations, and probably doing a lot of these cloud security checklist. I think OAS also has that cloud security checklist, following up with those checklists, and probably even the basic checklist. Let's say, okay, this is the things that we have done, and this is probably things that are required from those checklists. Probably going through that also might help these companies reduce their attack, at least to some certain extent.
Exactly, exactly. So yes, this is something that is really very crucial, we think, and yes, this should be taken into consideration with the every cases which are being happening throughout the months and years. So
Right.
yes, totally agree. Okay, so moving to our next question, Yogesh. So like India is going cashless.
Right.
Okay, we are using UPIs, we are using credit cards, debit cards, and almost the young generation is eliminating the use of cash. Okay, so when we talk about the whatever the hardware mechanisms are being involved in the terms of payments, okay, say we have POS machines. So you have closely worked with the hardware security as well. Okay, so what do you think that these particular POS machines or the hardware level security means to the means to this particular community in fintech? Means how do you think that how the security of such devices should be maintained?
It's a very good question. I think a lot of these post machines that you say, a lot of these machines that these vendors have in them, the first it begins with finding out how your device communicates with other device. Let's say and figuring out your attack surface. When you have a device, let's say in a shopkeeper, he has a Paytm post machine where he accepts the payment. So the possible attack surface from where an attacker can attack is probably through the Bluetooth low energy, if it uses Bluetooth, or if it also uses some sort of open ports. Because if you've seen a lot of these IoT devices, from where they get compromised, one of the things is that from your debug ports, or probably even from any of the ports that are openly exposed. Let's say your USB ports, or any sort of port that allows you to have direct access to the hardware, right? So I think from the hardware perspective, it's important to understand that which of these protocols are actually exposed. The Bluetooth low energy are probably, if you're using any VoLT services to have a SIM card inside, and probably to communicate with something else. So those things are probably, if your device also uses chip readers, magnetic chip readers, those kind of things. I think having an individual security, I wouldn't say audit probably, or having an individual security health checkup with these kind of protocols, with these kind of attack surfaces, will help these machines like POS machine stay away from the attackers. Most of the things that I have seen in the past and has happened in the past arises from your two things. One is from your wireless communication, and the other thing is from your tagged access to the ports.
Correct. Okay. Yeah. So yes, one thing basically I have also noticed the wireless technology that you just mentioned. So the RFID, security I was once looking on.
Yeah.
So there is very deep understanding in which we can go for the RFIDs and all those kind of stuff, which can basically be compromised if we talk specifically about these POS machine and all those kind of stuff.
Right.
Okay, perfect. Yogesh, my next question to you is a very, very, you can say, a rise in the cases in terms of security, in the terms of breaches, in the terms of illegal and unauthorized payment transactions. Okay, that currently India is facing in terms of account takeovers when with the help of social engineering attacks. Say, uh, we are seeing daily in the newspapers that the people's money are getting debited with the unauthorized access to their accounts. Okay, so how do you think that such things can be eliminated with the a layer in the bank information security? Like there should be some sort of security mechanism involved, because OTP is something that is okay. Okay, I totally agree to it that the multi-factor authentication is the one of the most secure thing that one can do. But just in terms of the layman, like whatever the people of India are expecting the banks to give them a security in terms of such unauthorized access and the transactions, illegal transactions.
I think from my side, banks have done their part of securing the customers, and banks have done that part of securing what they could do. But I think the major problem lies in educating the customers, right? So we have a huge, what you should understand is that when we have a digital disruption, when we move into new technologies, it also creates a divide among the people, right? People who know how to use things and people who don't know how to use things, people who are rich and can afford things and people who are poor who cannot afford to have such things. Now the problem lies in educating that population where they don't have access to technology and they don't know how to use the technology, right? So let's say right now a lot of these you say transactional fraud that has happened is mostly from OLX systems, or from OLX, right? So what happens there is that somebody just says, hey, I'm sending you a QR code, please scan that, and then just go ahead, I'll pay you 10,000, and then that's you'll receive your initial amount. Now the problem is that people who click on those things, people who click on those links, people who scan those QR code are very gullible. And the problem is it's not only the uneducated people, it's even the educated people I've seen doing that. And the problem is, I think it lies with more of a user experience. It lies with these payment providers educating the customer, saying that I think Google Pay has now done that. So if you scan a new QR code, or if you're sending money to somebody, it just pops up and says that aap isko bhej rahe hai. Yeah, matlab, so it just gives you that notification, right? I think it's that you also, with the other payment providers like Phone Pay and others, also follow up with educating the customers that, hey, if you scan a QR code of somebody, it's nowhere that you receive the payment. You can only send the payment from yours to others, right? I think the part lies in because these are the kind of social engineering attacks, right? It's not the application security. It's not the application attack. It's not the network based attack. It's in the social engineering where people fool each other, saying that, hey, you're going to receive some initial amount and I'm going to send it to you, right? So I think these problems can be easily fixed with educating the customers and educating that population of people which had just got access to technology and that they have no idea this happens. So I think it's more on educating the customer, I would say.
I agree, totally agree to your point, because educating the Indian people is something that is really a very tedious task, I must say. And the banks and the very young generation who are using these particular mechanisms of payments should be the correct owners of doing this thing. So
And
yeah.
these things can be also, the educating the customers can also be done. I think it's more of a user experience problem, where user has to be educated in their let's say mother tongue. So if a person is let's say from Haryana or some other part of India, you cannot be sending a message saying that you are sending 10,000 rupees to somebody, please do not send. The language cannot be in English, right? So the language could be in terms of their own mother tongue, so that people who do not
Mhm.
have, who just had access to technology and who have never had used it before, can easily relate to that, saying that, okay, so this is in my mother tongue. So it's a user experience problem, where we
Mhm.
train and inform users that this is going to happen the very next moment.
Okay, okay. Yes, yes, totally, totally correct. Agree to your point. Okay. So, moving ahead, Yogesh, what I have experienced in my corporate journey till yet in means basically we deals with the banks and the financial institutions. Okay, so there are very big companies, okay, who basically rely on the third party penetration testing of the products. Okay, they basically don't have an internal, security dedicated security team. So, do you think that that is really required, or the third party pen test and audits and the other security related activities are sufficient enough to uh, to fight with the current attack scenario that currently we all are indulged with?
I think that's I think one of the major hurdles with a lot of companies, with the startups, because a lot of startups cannot afford to have separate development team and infosec teams, right? So, and that's when the failure to collaborate with the infosec team happens. And it's an undeniable fact that a lot of these infosec guys do not know a lot about security attacks. Infosec guys do not know a lot about how the application has been developed. Because see, with the penetration testing, it's more of doing the dynamic testing. It's very less of what has happened right before, when you're developing the code, when you're probably architecting the application. So penetration testers care very less about how the application has been architected. And once the application has been architected and shipped, that's when penetration testers comes into play. And I believe that having an internal security team is very important for every company, is because first of all, as I spoke about, having DevSecops culture in your company, where you integrate security right in your development sprint, are very important, because that helps you identify the attacks and security loopholes before even it goes into production, right? So when you have something that goes right, I mean, that prevents you before even you go into production, that doesn't cause any security issues. So now you are left out with business logic flaws and a lot of other things. So misconfigurations, and you can also use a lot of these open source tools to help you cope up with these DevSecops culture, where you have something like code scanning. You also have SaaS tools, check marks, and a lot of these tools, right? So you can, and also a lot of these Docker security, container security scanner tools. So you can use these open source alternatives. If you cannot afford to have a separate security team, probably train your developers to operate, or bring in your DevSecOps culture, where they know before even they bring into production, so that they can prevent it right then and there.
Agree, totally agree to your point. The dedicated security team is something that is really crucial, because even after you get today you get virtual CISO services, okay,
Yep.
but not hiring a dedicated CISO or infosec team and getting the virtual CISO services, I don't think that much of clarity over the understanding of security aspects and continuous feedback and
Right.
implementing the approach towards the security cultures is something that is really important. So
And
yeah.
also that having only a development team is not sufficient, is because a lot of these developers, if you have made, they do not understand threat modeling, attack surface mapping. These things are very crucial, right? When we deploy the applications, understanding how your application can be attacked is very important. Now if you were to talk to a developer saying that, hey, sometimes opening up port number 21 and 22 can might cause an issue, so let's not open that, right? So when you say that, that could be an attack surface, that could be from where the threat actor could attack us. Now these developers don't understand those stuff. So I think having a dedicated teams is very important, is because now that gap, filling up that gap between a developer and a security team, and understanding each other is very important. And as you said, during the software development life cycle, the feedback loop is always existing. So when that feedback loop exists, what happens is that the developers always keep on telling to security guys, okay, this has happened. And the security guys come back to the developers saying that, hey, this is what we found out in your source code, or probably this is what we found out in your application when it was deployed, or probably the application was deployed or configured incorrectly. So in that case, having a dedicated, even if it is a small team, having that feedback cycle, that loop cycle is very important to, to maintain that life cycle of software development.
Totally agree. Totally agree. Means this should be the approach that every startup must be following.
Right.
Great. Okay. Now, coming back to the reNgine. Okay. So basically, you are the sole developer of reNgine, right? So being a big success of reNgine, do you think that in the coming days you'll be collaborating with the more people to making this reNgine to reach new heights, or you will be going to with sole developer in future as well?
No, I wish more people contribute to it, because I have developed reNgine to what I can imagine, I can think of. The reason why it's open source is because it can gather a lot of ideas from people like you. Let's say Signzy has a lot of requirement and they can come back to us, or probably Signzy can also, help some of the good developers contribute to reNgine. Now, I think we have had around 38, I think 35 people who have contributed a minor stuffs and reNgine. Some have also brought in some couple of cool features here and there. I think the problem that I'm facing is that I think it's more with now that reNgine has become a huge software system. It has a lot of components, and writing the documentation also is very difficult to tell others that, hey, this is how you develop, right? And the major issue and the major problem that I found out, while training the people at least to contribute to reNgine, is that a lot of these pen testers who use reNgine on a day-to-day basis, they have a very little or no experience with the development and understanding the whole software architecture.
Totally agree.
Right. And on the other counterpart, developers who wants to contribute to reNgine and who know how to develop reNgine, they have a very little idea about reconnaissance. They have a very little idea about what the community needs, right? So that is exactly the problem that I've been facing, bringing in more people while contributing to reNgine. So I think we have had a lot of people contribute, but it's a minor here and there. I think we might see a couple of people coming into reNgine and bringing in a lot of these major feature probably in the future, after having the developers documentation, or probably say this is exactly what you need to contribute. Maybe let's see in the future.
Okay, so we are currently lacking someone who is a built of board developer and a tester, right, kind of that. Great. So I guess someone from Signzy would love to contribute in the some features that are currently in your roadmap. So when we talk about the roadmap, yes, my next question is basically that how exactly, so basically when you have some features in mind, okay, so if I talk in terms of, a company based methodology or SDLC based methodology, so how exactly do you roadmap your features based upon the releases of reNgine, or, it is a kind of feedback from people that, yes, this is one thing that we want, or you have your own idea. So how exactly it is?
Majorly it's my ideas. Then comes a lot of ideas we gather from community. We have our own Discord channel from where people tell that, hey, this is the feature that we want. Okay. And the other things that where we gather a lot of these ideas is from our GitHub issues. We have a feature request where people can come in and say, hey, this is what we need. So majority of the things comes from these three. Some of my ideas, personal ideas, some of the community from our Discord channels, and some of the from the GitHub things, and some also comes from my own uses. So as I said in the past, when I was working as a pen tester, I really needed to have something. Now Nuclear is really good, as you said. Nuclear is really good. It brings a lot of good results, but there are no tools that also produces the customizable PDF reports, right? So if you have seen the recent release of reNgine 1.1, I brought in that feature because that is something that I needed. And I think a lot of these companies and individuals that are using having a PDF feature is very important, because when you give it to, let's say, people from C-level or an executive, they're not going to understand XSS, they're not going to understand your attack vectors, right? So they understand more of such PDF report or executive reports. So reNgine does a very good job at creating your executive reports, a summary of the whole scan, and it's all customizable, whatever you need, even to the point that, the nitty-gritty stuff like your colors, even whether you want to credit reNgine or not, those small tiny stuffs are there all over the reNgine. So a lot of these ideas comes, and let's say right now, since you guys are using Signzy reNgine, if you have any feature requests, just feel free to go to GitHub and raise separate issues for these separate features, and then we might be very happy, we'll be very happy to bring in these features probably in the next releases. So if you have such,
Definitely.
just
Definitely. No worries. We can get in touch with you personally as well for that.
yeah, we have a Discord
Yes, yes,
community.
yes.
I think we have around 500 people there, so just bring in
In the
features.
Discord, right?
Yeah, in the Discord, right?
Agree. Okay, cool. So, uh, coming on to my next query or question, you can say, like you have recently means it's a long time you have launched the bug bounty program for reNgine.
Yeah.
Okay, and adding to this question, like till the time it's been almost 2 years, till the time, what exactly is the perfect use case for reNgine you have come across? Like the people used to give you feedback. Okay, you have a Discord community, we have an information security big community. reNgine is trending in the GitHub as of now. So what is the one perfect use case, or you can say the best use case you have seen till now, that people and the community are using and making it out of reNgine?
You mean some specific features, or
Yes, yes, like say we at Signzy are using it to, we don't want to sit on the system and see each and every particular URL running multiple tools. Okay, so what we did, we put all our, the inventory at one place. We scheduled our scans. We got the alerting system, and we filter out the results based upon our requirements. Okay, so this is the one use case that as a company we are doing. Okay, so you might have been come across people, okay, who said that yes, this is the one thing that I like best about reNgine. So
uh,
that one thing.
I think the best part about everything loves about reNgine is probably the alerting system. That's everybody loves
Hmm.
it. Other thing is scheduling. A lot of these tools that you have in the GitHub right now, they're really good. One of them that I would like to give a shout out is Recon FTW. It's a really good tool, but a lot of these tools, what they lack is scheduling features. Right, so scheduling is everybody is something that everybody loves, and the other thing is probably the UI. I think that's something a lot of people
Yes,
would
UI
love to
UX is
speak about.
something that is really good.
Yeah, so having everything in a tabular structure, having your screenshots on the right hand side, having everything, because this thing came from a lot of what do you say, hit and trial, and figuring out what works the best. Because if you have seen in the last 2 years, reNgine has gone through three major UI changes, like major. It has
Exactly,
right now, the
exactly.
recent
Hmm.
release is even more compelling, even more easier to use, right?
It's
So
it's the best UI UX means in
yeah.
all the releases we have
Thank you
seen.
so much for that. So it came through a lot of listening to the community what they exactly need, and I think a lot of people talk about the user interface and how everything is organized in one. Because having,
Hmm.
see, let's say recon FW is really good, but if you were to find out this IP address has this many ports open, it's difficult to figure out that. Or probably this domain has this IP address, and this IP address has these ports open, and this port has this vulnerability. It's
Correct,
very
correct.
difficult with these tools that produce
Hmm.
the TXT format of output, or probably even your JSON format of output. It's difficult to do that. So
Hmm.
what reNgine wins over every other tools is that fancy UI, where you get to see your what's the web server, what's the subdomain, what is the technologies being used on one side, and you have all the contents. And even let's say, if you could also sort the whole subdomains using the content length, using HTTP status, and everything in one place, right? So that's something everybody loves. And the other thing that I've heard from people, the feedback that we have got is our own custom search queries. So where you could just say HTTP status not equals to 200, and you just keep on adding the queries, right? So that's something that I've also worked on for a long time, and that has come up as something really good. Because people see, when you do not have with these tools, if you say recon FTW or any other reconnaissance tools, if you were to filter out all the subdomains saying that, hey, I need a subdomain that has admin in the page title, and that also has HTTP status 200, and that also has content length not equals to 0. So if you were to find out all these subdomains, it's really difficult unless you are pro at graping, right? So that's where reNgine comes into play, where you could just write human like language, say HTTP underscore status equals to 200, and name equals to admin, and and content length not equals to 0. So that way you could filter out the results from like huge subdomain list to probably having a couple of them. So those are the
Exactly.
use
So the
cases.
filtering out of the basically the one is expecting is something that is really a very good feature. And yes, the to the first feature that you just said, that mapping of each and every domain with its scope, with its vulnerability, with its
Yep.
status code, each and everything. So yes, that also is one of the very good feature that we came across. Cool. So I guess it's time for us, Yogesh, to wind up this session. But before winding up, basically, we wanted you to share us your views upon the, the fresh grads who are coming out of the, colleges, and basically what we have seen in the industry, in the education, especially if I talk about India, is that colleges are basically focusing more towards the development part. Okay, like you should learn all these kind of programming languages, you should do competitive coding, you should try to maintain your profile in this particular development domain only. Okay, but there are multiple fields in IT. Say cybersecurity is the one, networking is the one, database is the one, and there are ample of fields, AI, ML, and all those kind of stuff. Okay, so if I talk specifically about the cybersecurity, okay, so how will you, uh, you can say, wind up your approach towards the new fresh grad students who are coming out of the college and universities and want to pursue their, uh, career in the terms of cybersecurity?
I think this is something that we also people from corporates would speak about, because not in a lot of universities you see and colleges that you see cybersecurity is a part of curriculum. It's not in the part of curriculum, right? And I think a lot of students lack there. But now with the technologies that are evolving with the blogs and a lot of these things, it's and social medias, and people now have come to understand, because at some point in time you know that bug hunting, bug bounty was a craze. It was almost everybody used to talk about, right? So having those things on social media helps us reach those people. But approach to cybersecurity for the college students, my first suggestion is that not just for cybersecurity. If you are in your college, I think if you're in the college days right now, just passing out, I think it's very important that you focus on every part of technology, not just one, not just development, not just competitive coding. Because what really happens is that if you were not to try something, let's say if you were not to try security when you were young, probably you would not be here, right? We tried and then we saw, okay, this is something that I love. Now my only suggestion for students that are in college right now is that when you're in the college, when you have a lot of time to learn and a lot of and a few responsibilities in your life, probably spend more time learning a lot of technologies. Let's say security, let's say AI, ML, let's say AR, VR, a lot of these things, whatever are you see, probably build a small project. You don't have to build a huge project spending years and years on that. Probably build a few small projects, and then probably go through a few of these blogs, or probably a research paper, and find out at the end of right. When I joined as a fresher, I joined as a cybersecurity engineer, and now that has transformed to research engineer. I don't know what's going to happen in the next, because this all happened is because when I was in my college days, I was looking at a lot of these technologies like IoT, like AR, VR, and see where my spark, where is that spark of passion lies in, right? So when you're in the college, focus on that. And talking about security specifically, there are a lot of resources to learn. It's very easy for people right now to just go learn from Web Security Academy, from Portugal. Pentest Academy is very accessible. It's not really expensive. It's I think $25 per month, and
Yeah.
everybody can. A lot of us can afford that as well. So if you are somebody who is getting started into cybersecurity, or somebody who wants to get into cybersecurity from college, is that understanding how computers works, understanding how programming works is something that is important. It is not the basic requirement, or probably it is not something without that you cannot start security, but it's very inevitable. It's important for you to understand how these things work. And once you have understanding of how technologies work, probably focus more on focus some time on building these technologies. Let's say building a web application also helps you as a security engineer, helps you know that where developers can go wrong, right?
Exactly.
So it's very important that in the college days, focus on building as well as breaking, and also seeing behind the scene what happens, all these things. Building project helps that. So one of my suggestion that I always give it to college students is that spend more time building the projects, spend more time doing the real world projects, so that because when you're developing some project, you're not, let's say before I started reNgine, I absolutely hated building a UI, and I still hate building UI, okay, because it's not something that I love doing. But developing a project helps you understand every bit of it. You are the guy who does the DevOps, you are the guy who does database writing the queries, optimizing the queries, you are the same guy who writes the backend APIs, everything, right? So building a project always helps that. So if you're in the college, probably spend more and more time building projects and understanding how technology works. So today you might be intrigued by cybersecurity, tomorrow you might be intrigued by IoT, but understanding all these technologies helps you stand out from the crowd. And also having this knowledge, it doesn't go in vain. So my suggestion is that if you really want to get into cybersecurity, Portsugar Web Security Academy, Pentester Lab, and a lot of courses on Udemy. I think one of the really good course that I always suggest people is the course from Heath Adams. I think it's cybersecurity.
Exactly.
So it's cybersecurity 101 or something like that. It's really good from Heath Adams. That course is really good.
It's I guess practical ethical hacking.
Yeah, I think something like that.
Yep.
So exactly. I personally have taken, people around me have taken that. So it's really good. And those courses can be brought in at CPS 400 to 500 rupees on Udemy sales. So it's very easy it's affordable and accessible with everyone as well. So focus on these things, and probably, when you're in the college days, when you have a lot of time, do a lot of bug bounty as well, because doing the bug bounty helps you also understand how things works. Because when you're doing the penetration testing, you know that you are restricted by a lot of things, but doing that in the bug bounty, it's a lot different in a scenario. So spend more time learning is what I say to everybody.
Exactly, means totally agree to means whatever the pointers that you have shared here. So it also gives me an the kind of feeling to share you that our information team, security team at Signzy, when this team formed, 95 to 99% of the team, means everyone in the team joined the company when they were in the college days, means the final days of their college. Okay, but the skill set that they have worked on was totally commendable.
Right.
Okay, so yes, totally agree. It means there are ample of free resources out there. Okay, but like you said, that the bug bounty is something that gives you a really vast scope. Okay, in the corporate life, you had just have like 2 projects. You have to do this, do the Nmap scan and SQL and all those top 10 attacks, and that's it. Okay, but bug bounty is something that is means which gives you a very variety of the technologies that you can test upon, as well as the kind of environment where you can exemplify your skills to test more and more, and that is a really never ending kind of thing.
Right.
Great. Okay, so Yogesh, I guess that was all from my end. So yeah, thank you so much for giving us your time.
Thank you so
really
much for inviting me.
of the entire company.
It was a real pleasure, talking with you and sharing my experience. I hope to meet you in person someday. That's
definitely. No worries.
Thank you so much once again.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.
You too have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.